The midnight neon sign flickered, casting an eerie blue glow across the empty parking lot where once, not so long ago, you couldn't find a spot after 6 p.m. The letters DINER buzzed faintly, the final R permanently dark. Inside, a single waitress wiped down counters that had served thousands, perhaps millions of meals over 6 decades. This was Mel's Roadside, established 1947, and tomorrow would be its last day in business. This is the story of how America's highways were once lined with these beacons of hospitality, and how they faded from our landscape almost as quickly as they appeared. What happens when a nation's relationship with food, travel, and community fundamentally changes? And why, despite their decline, do these humble establishments still hold such power in our collective memory? At 5:30 a.m., Harold Gibson unlocks the door of the Silver Rail Diner in Plainville, Connecticut, just as he has every morning for 47 years. His movements are automatic, practiced flipping on lights, firing up the ancient Garland grill that's been cooking since Eisenhower was president, setting coffee to brew. Through the windows, headlights occasionally sweep past on Route 10, fewer each year, as the new interstate diverts traffic 3 miles east. Harold doesn't need to look at his watch to know it's time to start the home fries. For nearly half a century, his internal clock has been synchronized to the rhythm of the American diner. "My father bought this place in 1954, Harold says, his voice carrying the gentle rasp of someone who has spent a lifetime in rooms filled with grill smoke and conversation. Before that, it was a converted dining car from the New Haven line. They pulled it here with horses in '38, if you can believe that." The early morning silence is broken by the arrival of Gladys Evans, waitress at the Silver Rail since 1972. The small bell above the door announces her arrival, as it has for over 100,000 mornings, the same tinkling sound that once welcomed truckers, traveling salesmen, young couples on road trips, and local factory workers heading to now-closed manufacturing plants. "Morning, Harold," she says, hanging her coat on a rack that's held the jackets of several generations. "Coffee smells good." This scene, playing out in the pre-dawn hours, was once replicated in thousands of locations across America. At their peak in the late 1950s, an estimated 6,000 diners dotted the American landscape, stainless steel and neon landmarks offering affordable meals and a temporary community for a nation increasingly on the move. The story of the American roadside diner begins not on the highway, but on the streets of Providence, Rhode Island. In 1872, a 17-year-old entrepreneur named Walter Scott began selling sandwiches and coffee from a basket to night workers from a local newspaper. Scott quickly realized the demand for late-night food service and upgraded to a horse-drawn wagon equipped with a simple kitchen. The night lunch wagon was born, offering hot meals to shift workers, journalists, theatergoers, and others moving through America's increasingly industrialized cities after dark. By the 1890s, these lunch wagons had evolved into more permanent structures. Thomas H. Buckley of Worcester, Massachusetts, began manufacturing purpose-built dining cars, restaurants designed to resemble the dining cars of passenger trains, but permanently parked on city streets. These early diners featured counters with stools, a serving area, and occasionally a few booths. The White House Cafe in Providence began as one such wagon in 1896. According to city records, it served an average of 700 customers daily, working-class men fueling up before or after long shifts at nearby textile mills. A meal of eggs, toast, potatoes, and coffee cost 15 cents, about $5 in today's currency, but representing nearly an hour's wage for many workers at the time. Some say the popularity of these early establishments was enhanced by their location near trolley transfer points, where passengers might have to wait in the cold. Others suggest their appeal lay in something more fundamental, the promise of hot, affordable food served quickly, at any hour, with a side of human connection. Perhaps both explanations, and others, contain elements of truth. The transformation from urban lunch wagon to roadside diner was catalyzed by an innovation that would reshape American society, the automobile. In 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T, and by 1920, Americans owned over 8 million automobiles. As car ownership expanded, so did the nation's road network. The Federal Highway Act of 1921 provided matching funds to states for road construction, marking the beginning of a national highway system. The increasing mobility of Americans created a new market, travelers needing places to eat along these emerging highways. Entrepreneurs recognized the opportunity, and diners began to migrate from city centers to roadsides. In 1924, Patrick J. "Pop" Tierney established the first Jerry O'Mahony factory in Elizabeth, New Jersey, dedicated exclusively to manufacturing prefabricated diners. By 1925, the company was producing approximately 50 diners annually, selling them to aspiring restaurateurs for between $1,000 and $10,000, depending on size and amenities. These factory-built diners were marvels of efficiency. Manufacturers like O'Mahony, Cullman, and Mountain View created establishments that could be shipped by rail and installed on prepared foundations within days. Each came fully equipped with grills, refrigeration, ventilation systems, and the now iconic stainless steel and neon aesthetic. When the Blue Star Diner arrived in Southington, Connecticut in 1932, the local newspaper reported that nearly 200 onlookers gathered to watch the curious sight of an entire restaurant being delivered on a flatbed truck. Owner Michael Demetrios, a Greek immigrant, had saved for 7 years to afford the $7,800 purchase price. Within a month of opening, the Blue Star was serving over 250 customers daily in a town of just 5,600 people. The appeal was immediate and powerful. In an era before chain restaurants dominated the landscape, these independently owned establishments offered a reassuring consistency to travelers. The stainless steel exterior signaled cleanliness and modernity. Large windows allowed potential customers to see the interior before entering. The menu, often featuring hundreds of items from breakfast classics to blue plate specials, promised something for everyone at prices working people could afford. But the heart of the diner experience wasn't just the building or the food, it was the people. By the early 1930s, an estimated 4,000 diners operated across the northeastern United States. Behind their counters stood a remarkably diverse workforce, immigrants from Greece, Italy, Eastern Europe, and Ireland, who had found in these small businesses both a livelihood and an entry point into the American dream. Nicholas Kardassis arrived at Ellis Island from Greece in 1923 with $18 in his pocket. By 1935, he owned 3 diners along Route 1 in New Jersey. "My father couldn't speak much English when he arrived," his son Thomas recalled in a 1978 interview, "but he understood that Americans wanted good food fast, and they wanted someone to remember their name when they came back." The diner business was perfect for him. You didn't need perfect English to fry an egg or remember a regular customer like their coffee black. By the late 1930s, the roadside diner had become such a fixture of American culture that it began appearing in popular music, literature, and art. Edward Hopper's iconic 1942 painting Nighthawks captured the particular melancholy and comfort of these all-night havens, while films increasingly used diners as settings for pivotal scenes, places where strangers could meet, relationships could end, or lives could change direction over a cup of coffee. The golden age of the American diner coincided with what many consider the golden age of American prosperity. Following World War II, the United States experienced unprecedented economic growth. The GI Bill enabled returning veterans to attend college and purchase homes. The baby boom created a generation of families with disposable income. Car ownership exploded from 25 million vehicles in 1945 to over 40 million by 1950. Americans were on the move as never before, and the roadside diner was perfectly positioned to serve this mobile nation. At 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in 1957, the Starlight Diner on Route 66 outside Amarillo, Texas, exemplified this golden era. 15 semi-trucks occupied the expanded parking lot as drivers grabbed breakfast before continuing their journeys. Inside, counterman Ray Jefferson worked the grill with choreographed precision, simultaneously managing eggs for 3 customers, flipping pancakes for another 2, and keeping an eye on the hash browns browning at the edge of the cooking surface. Gladys Martinez, head waitress since the Starlight opened in 1951, moved efficiently along the counter, refilling coffee cups without being asked, remembering which regular customers wanted their eggs over easy and which preferred them scrambled. Behind her, 3 other waitresses handled the booths, where families on vacation studied maps while children colored on paper placemats. The cash register rang constantly as customers settled their bills. $1.25 for the breakfast special, 2 eggs, bacon or sausage, toast and coffee, $2.75 for the chicken fried steak platter with mashed potatoes and green beans. Owner Henry Stillman circulated through the diner, greeting customers by name when possible, ensuring everything ran smoothly. "We served 427 customers that day," Stillman noted in his business ledger, preserved now in the Route 66 Museum in Clinton, Oklahoma. "Best Tuesday we ever had." The success of diners during this period stemmed from their ability to meet multiple needs. For travelers, they offered reliable food and a place to rest during long journeys. For locals, they provided a gathering spot where community connections could form and be maintained. For workers, both those employed by the diners and those who ate there, they represented an affordable luxury in daily life. Joyce Miller, who waitressed at 5 different diners around Cleveland between 1953 and 1968, recalled the sense of community that formed around these establishments. "We had the morning regulars, mostly men heading to factory jobs. They'd sit at the counter every day, same spots, almost like assigned seating. Then came the ladies after they dropped kids at school. Lunch brought office workers, and dinner was families or couples. After 10 p.m., it was younger people out on dates or coming from movies or dances." This regular rhythm created a unique social ecosystem. Diners became places where people from different walks of life encountered one another, where a bank executive might sit next to a truck driver, where a traveling salesman could get local tips from a waitress who knew the area, where strangers could momentarily share in the common experience of being human and hungry. By 1958, the number of diners across America had grown to approximately 6,000 establishments. Competition among manufacturers drove innovations in design and amenities. The Worcester Lunch Car Company introduced built-in air conditioning as a standard feature. Coleman added jukeboxes at each booth. The Mountain View Diner Company pioneered larger plate glass windows and more dramatic exterior lighting. The distinct stainless steel and neon aesthetic reached its zenith, with establishments like the extravagant Tick-Tock Diner in Clifton, New Jersey, featuring over 3,200 feet of neon tubing and a 24-foot illuminated clock visible from a quarter-mile away. Inside these gleaming establishments, menus expanded to meet the growing expectations of American diners. The Blue Plate Special, a complete meal at a fixed price, traditionally served on plates with blue patterns, became a diner staple. Homemade pies rotated in illuminated cases. Greek owners introduced items like gyros and spanakopita alongside traditional American fare. Italian proprietors added pasta dishes and cannoli to the offerings. "You could get anything at the Empire Diner," recalled regular customer Frank Sullivan of Albany, New York. "Breakfast at midnight, a 3-course turkey dinner at 7 a.m. if you wanted." "My father worked night shifts and we'd go there when he got off at 6 in the morning. He'd have pot roast while I had pancakes. Nobody batted an eye." This accommodating approach to dining reflected the increasingly diverse schedules of Americans. As factories operated around the clock and entertainment options expanded, the traditional 3 meals at set times pattern began to break down. Diners, with their extended or 24-hour operations, filled this need perfectly. For employees, diners often provided better opportunities than many other jobs available to those without higher education. Waitresses at busy establishments could earn significantly more in tips than factory workers made in wages. A 1956 survey by Restaurant Management magazine found that experienced diner waitresses in high-traffic locations averaged $85.10 weekly in wages and tips combined, equivalent to approximately $850 in today's dollars, and competitive with many male-dominated professions at the time. "I put both my kids through college on diner tips," said Margaret Wilson, who worked at the Silver Moon in Hartford from 1954 to 1979. "People didn't look down on you for being a waitress there. The regular customers respected you. They saw you working hard, remembering their orders, treating them right. I never felt I needed a better job." The prosperity wasn't universal, however. Behind the gleaming counters, racial disparities remained entrenched. In many establishments, particularly in the South, African Americans could work as cooks or dishwashers, but not in customer-facing roles. And while Northern diners generally served Black customers, many Southern establishments remained segregated until forced to integrate by civil rights legislation in the 1960s. Robert Johnson, who cooked at the Dixie Diner in Raleigh, North Carolina from 1949 to 1972, described the paradox. I made the food everybody ate, but for years I couldn't sit at the counter and eat it myself. Had to take my meals in the back room. White travelers from up north sometimes got confused about that. They'd see me cooking and try to chat, not understanding how things worked down here. Even as the diner reached its zenith in popularity, forces that would eventually lead to its decline were already taking shape. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, authorizing the construction of 41,000 miles of interstate highways. This massive infrastructure project would fundamentally alter American travel patterns and, consequently, the fortunes of businesses that depended on highway traffic. The impact wasn't immediately apparent. In fact, the initial phases of interstate construction seemed to benefit many diners as increased mobility led to more Americans taking to the roads. But as the new highways bypassed towns and existing routes, the effects began to show. Diners located on what were now old highways saw dramatic drops in business as traffic shifted to interstates where access was limited and exits might be miles apart. The Gateway Diner in Newburgh, New York, provides a stark example of this change. Located on Route 9W, a major north-south route before the interstate era, the Gateway served approximately 1,200 customers daily in 1955. After the completion of the nearby section of Interstate 87 in 1960, daily customer counts fell to fewer than 400. By 1963, the Gateway had closed its doors permanently. Owner David Friedman told the local newspaper, "People don't drive past our door anymore. They're up there on the big highway, and when they exit, they're looking for something right at the interchange, not something they have to find their way to." This pattern repeated thousands of times across the country. Diners that had thrived on capturing pass-through traffic suddenly found themselves on roads less traveled. Some owners attempted to relocate closer to interstate exits, but the costs were prohibitive for many small businesses. A 1964 study by the New York State Thruway Authority found that 40% of restaurants on bypassed routes had closed within 5 years of interstate openings. Adding to these challenges, the interstate system facilitated the expansion of a new competitor, the chain restaurant. While Howard Johnson's had established a successful restaurant chain along the East Coast since the 1930s, the interstate era saw the rapid growth of national brands with standardized offerings. In 1955, Ray Kroc opened his first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois. By 1961, Kroc had bought out the McDonald brothers and was rapidly expanding the concept. The company specifically targeted interstate highway exits for new locations, understanding the captive market these positions provided. In 1968, McDonald's opened its 1,000th restaurant. By 1975, that number had grown to 4,000. McDonald's and other fast food chains offered something diners couldn't: absolute consistency from location to location. A traveler in an unfamiliar area knew exactly what to expect from a McDonald's hamburger or a Kentucky Fried Chicken dinner, eliminating the element of chance inherent in stopping at an independent establishment. The chains also benefited from economies of scale that independent diners couldn't match. National advertising campaigns built brand recognition that local diners couldn't afford to create. Centralized purchasing allowed chains to negotiate lower food costs. Simplified menus and production methods meant lower labor costs and faster service, critical advantages for travelers more interested in quickly getting back on the road than in a leisurely dining experience. Some say the interstate system's impact on diners was inevitable, Progress claiming another casualty. Others suggest federal highway policy effectively subsidized chain restaurants by creating a system that favored their business model over that of independent establishments. The truth likely contains elements of both perspectives. Beyond highways and chains, broader cultural shifts were eroding the diner's position in American life. The baby boom generation, reaching adolescence and young adulthood in the 1960s and 70s, developed different dining preferences than their parents. McDonald's and its competitors specifically targeted children and teenagers in their marketing, creating loyal customers who grew up associating dining out with branded experiences rather than independent establishments. The late 1960s and 1970s also saw increasing awareness of nutrition and health concerns. The traditional diner menu, heavy on fried foods, refined carbohydrates, and animal fats, began to seem outdated to more health-conscious consumers. While some diners attempted to adapt by adding salad bars and lighter fare sections to their menus, their fundamental identity remained tied to comfort food at a time when tastes were evolving. Economic factors compounded these challenges. The 1970s brought high inflation, rising food costs, and energy crises that hit small businesses particularly hard. Independent diners, often operating on thin margins, struggled to absorb these increased expenses without raising prices to levels that would drive away customers. Many found themselves caught in a downward spiral, raising prices to cover costs, losing customers due to the increases, then needing to raise prices further to compensate for reduced volume. Harold Gibson recalls this period vividly. The oil embargo in '73 nearly killed us. First, we lost all the road traffic when people cut back on driving. Then our food delivery costs went through the roof because of fuel surcharges. Electric bills doubled. We had to raise our prices 3 times in 1 year, and each time we did, we lost more customers. By 1975, the number of traditional roadside diners had fallen to approximately 3,500 nationwide, a decline of over 40% from their peak. Manufacturing companies that had once produced dozens of prefabricated diners annually were closing their doors. The Jerry O'Mahony Diner Company, which had built over 2,000 diners since its founding, ceased operations in 1970. The Worcester Lunch Car Company closed in 1961 after building its 651st and final diner. Some establishments managed to adapt by fundamentally changing their business model. The Miss America Diner in Jersey City, facing declining customer counts, introduced a catering service in 1974 that eventually generated more revenue than the restaurant itself. Others found new niches by extending their hours to capture late-night business from bargoers, or by specializing in a particular menu item that chains couldn't match. For many, however, the writing was on the wall. A survey conducted by Restaurant and Institution magazine in 1977 found that 68% of remaining independent diner owners were at or near retirement age, and more than half had no succession plan or interested buyers for their businesses. Gladys Evans, the waitress at the Silver Rail, remembers the change in her customers during this period. The regulars kept coming, the old-timers who'd been eating with us for decades. But we weren't getting new regulars to replace the ones who passed on. Young people might stop in once out of curiosity, but they didn't make it part of their routine like their parents had. The 1980s brought a curious development in the diner's story. Even as traditional establishments continued to close, a new interest in diner aesthetics emerged in popular culture. Films like Diner, 1982, and When Harry Met Sally, 1989, featured pivotal scenes in diners. Fashion designers drew inspiration from 1950s aesthetics, including diner uniforms and decor. The stainless steel and neon look that had once signified modernity now evoked nostalgia for a supposedly simpler time in American life. This nostalgia sparked a phenomenon that would ultimately preserve aspects of diner culture while transforming its essence, the retro diner. These new establishments incorporated the visual elements of classic diners, the stainless steel, the neon, the vinyl booths, but operated under different business models and catered to different clientele. The Silver Diner chain, founded in 1989, exemplifies this approach. Launching in Rockville, Maryland, the company combined diner aesthetics with contemporary operations, locations in suburban shopping centers rather than on highways, hours catering to breakfast and lunch rather than late-night service, and menus featuring healthy options alongside traditional diner fare. By 1996, the chain had expanded to 12 locations and was serving approximately 40,000 customers weekly. Co-founder Robert Gerimo explained his concept. "We're not trying to be an authentic 1950s diner. We're taking what people loved about diners, the welcoming atmosphere, the wide menu selection, the feeling of being in a special place, and adapting it to contemporary tastes and expectations." Similar chains emerged across the country: Johnny Rockets, Ruby's Diner, Denny's with its classic diner rebranding, each offering a sanitized, standardized version of the diner experience. These establishments found success precisely because they weren't authentic diners. They offered consistency, convenient locations, and predictable experiences that ironically had more in common with the fast food chains that had helped displace traditional diners than with the independent establishments they visually referenced. For Harold Gibson and others like him still operating traditional diners, This trend produced mixed feelings. "It's flattering, I guess, that people want to copy our look," he said in 1994. But those places aren't diners. They're chain restaurants in diner costumes. A real diner has history. It has character you can't manufacture. It has the marks of decades of service. By the early 1990s, the number of authentic roadside diners had dwindled to fewer than 2,000 nationwide. Those that survived generally did so through some combination of fortunate location, loyal local clientele, and owners willing to accept modest returns to maintain establishments they viewed as more than just businesses. Some found unexpected salvation through historic preservation. The Tasty Diner in Silver Spring, Maryland, faced demolition in 2000 to make way for a development project. Public outcry led to a compromise. The 1939 diner was physically moved to a new location rather than destroyed. In Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the modern diner became the first diner listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, a designation that helped secure its future. Others were not so fortunate. When the Blue Top Diner in Highland, Indiana, closed in 2007 after 73 years in operation, owner Bob H. Mirovic told the Northwest Indiana Times, "People tell me they're heartbroken we're closing, but I haven't seen most of them in here for years. Everyone says they love diners, but not enough people actually eat in them anymore." The Great Recession beginning in 2008 accelerated the decline, claiming scores of marginal operations that had been barely hanging on. Yet paradoxically, this economic downturn also created conditions for a limited diner revival, as Americans seeking affordable dining options returned to establishments offering value-oriented meals. More significant was an emerging culinary trend: chef-driven diners. Beginning around 2010, a new generation of culinary professionals began opening establishments that honored diner traditions while updating them for contemporary tastes. The Empire Diner in New York City, a classic 1940s dining car, reopened in 2014 under chef Amanda Freitag with a menu featuring duck confit hash alongside traditional eggs and bacon. In Philadelphia, Honey's Sit and Eat combined diner aesthetics with farm-to-table sourcing and Jewish Southern fusion cuisine. "We're not trying to be a museum piece," explained Michael Bauer, chef-owner of the Modern Electric Diner in Portland, Oregon, which opened in 2013. "We're taking what was essential about diners, unpretentious food made with care, spaces where different types of people can gather comfortably, and expressing it in contemporary ways." These new interpretations found their audience primarily in urban areas among younger, more affluent diners seeking authentic experiences with a side of irony. The $14 organic grass-fed hamburger served on a traditional oval diner plate represented something fundamentally different from the $1.25 blue plate special of diners' heyday, even when served in similar surroundings. For traditional diners continuing to operate outside this trend, the 2010s brought new challenges. Rising real estate values in developing areas made property more valuable than the businesses operating on it. Changing breakfast habits, with Americans increasingly grabbing coffee and a quick bite rather than sitting for a full morning meal, eroded a crucial revenue stream. And finding staff willing to work diner hours for diner wages became increasingly difficult in a changing labor market. The COVID-19 pandemic that began in 2020 delivered what may prove a final blow to many surviving traditional diners. Establishments already operating on thin margins couldn't weather extended closures or capacity restrictions. Some pivoted to takeout service, but the diner experience was never primarily about the food itself. It was about the environment, the interactions, the feeling of being in a particular type of space that takeout couldn't replicate. When the Yankee Diner in Charlton, Massachusetts, closed permanently in July 2020 after 77 years in operation, owner George Fotopoulos told the Worcester Telegram, "This isn't just a restaurant closing, it's a piece of the community disappearing. 3 generations of families ate here. People had their first dates here, celebrated anniversaries here. Where do those memories go now?" Today, fewer than 1,500 traditional roadside diners remain in operation across the United States. Many survive as much through community loyalty and nostalgic attachment as through business fundamentals. Others have found new life as tourist attractions, trading on their increasingly rare authentic character to draw visitors seeking to experience a vanishing piece of Americana. At 7:45 p.m., Harold Gibson wipes down the grill at the Silver Rail one final time. Tomorrow will be the diner's last day in business after 68 years serving the community. A developer has purchased the property. The building will be demolished to make way for a convenience store and gas station. I'm not bitter, Harold says, though his eyes suggest otherwise. Things change, that's life, but I worry about what we lose when places like this disappear. It's not just somewhere to eat, it's somewhere to be together. Gladys Evans arranges silverware wrapped in paper napkins for tomorrow's service. I keep thinking about all the people who have sat at these counters over the years, she says. All the conversations, all the laughter, all the problems solved over coffee. You don't get that at a drive-through window. The last light of day fades outside, and the neon sign illuminates automatically, as it has every evening for decades. Silver Rail Diner, good food, always open, it proclaims, though after tomorrow, it never will be again. What happened to the American roadside diner? The simplest answer is that times changed, and they couldn't change with them. Highways rerouted traffic away from their doors. Chains offered consistency they couldn't match. American eating habits evolved beyond their traditional offerings. Real estate became too valuable, labor too expensive, margins too thin. But some say there's more to the story, that what happened to diners reflects deeper changes in American society, the decline of manufacturing jobs that once supported working-class customers, the accelerating pace of life that made leisurely meals seem inefficient, the erosion of public spaces where people from different backgrounds could casually interact, the replacement of local, independent businesses with national brands offering identical experiences regardless of location. Others suggest something more intangible was at work. That perhaps diners represented a particular moment in American culture that couldn't last, a post-war optimism, a belief in progress, a shared national identity that began fracturing in the cultural tumult of the 1960s and never fully reformed. There are even those who speak of diners as if they were living things, possessed of a spirit that couldn't survive transplantation to our contemporary world. These places had souls, says cultural historian Margaret Walters. They were built by immigrants who believed in the American dream. They were staffed by people who knew their communities intimately. They were gathering places in the truest sense. You can't franchise that. You can't mass-produce it. Ghost stories occasionally attach themselves to closed diners. In Lakeville, Connecticut, locals claim the abandoned Cadillac diner's lights sometimes glow at 3 a.m., though it's been disconnected from the power grid for decades. In Arizona, travelers on Old Route 66 report seeing a fully illuminated diner that disappears when approached. Former employees of shuttered establishments describe dreams where they return to find their old workplaces filled with customers from decades past, all waiting to place their orders. Perhaps these tales reflect nothing more than the powerful grip diners maintain on our collective imagination, our reluctance to let go of what they represented, if not what they actually were. Or perhaps there is something genuinely spectral about these spaces where so much of American life transpired, now standing empty or repurposed or demolished entirely. The last classic diner manufacturer, the Coleman Dining Car Company of Lebanon, New Jersey, ceased production of traditional diners in 1989 after building approximately 1,500 dining cars since 1927. The company survived by pivoting to modular construction of fast food restaurants, hospitals, and prison buildings, a transformation that itself seems to comment on changing American priorities. Yet even as the physical establishments continue to disappear, diner culture shows remarkable persistence in American memory. Television commercials use diner settings to evoke authenticity. Political candidates make campaign stops at surviving establishments to signal their connection to ordinary Americans. Artists continue to find inspiration in these spaces where private lives intersected in public view. Perhaps what happened to roadside diners isn't just a story about restaurants, but about a nation's relationship with its own past, about which parts of history we preserve and which we allow to fade away. About how we balance progress and preservation, efficiency and experience, innovation and tradition. At the Silver Rail, the last customer has left. Harold turns off the grill that has cooked tens of thousands of meals. Gladys counts out her tips, $43.78, a slow night. Tomorrow they'll serve breakfast and lunch, close early, and bid farewell to a place that has defined their lives for decades. Neither has specific plans for what comes next. I keep telling myself it's just a building, Harold says, but that's not really true, is it? It's more than that, it always was. Outside, the neon sign continues to glow, visible from the old highway where cars now pass infrequently. Silver Rail Diner, good food, always open. Until tomorrow, so whatever happened to America's roadside diners, the answer depends on who you ask and what you believe was lost. To economists, it's a straightforward case of market evolution, obsolete businesses replaced by more efficient models. To preservationists, it's a cautionary tale about sacrificing cultural heritage for convenience. To the communities that grew up around them, it's about the loss of gathering places that technology can't replace. And to those who worked within their stainless steel walls, it's about the end of a way of life that offered both livelihood and purpose. Perhaps all these perspectives contain elements of truth, or perhaps the full answer lies somewhere else entirely, in the fading glow of neon signs that once illuminated the American journey, as much a part of our landscape as the highways themselves, and now, like so much else from that optimistic post-war era, visible primarily in the rearview mirror as we speed toward whatever comes next.